Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another Mondays with Melissa. I'm excited to be here today to talk a little bit more about my conversation with Becca Reed last week. She shared so many amazing stories, some heartbreaking stories, some of the difficulties that she experienced as a foster parent in Honduras 8 years ago. And if you haven't listened to that episode, I would encourage you to go back and listen because it was so good. There was so much information. And she shared some really great content at the end of the episode, some different resources for you to look into. But today, I want to talk about trauma. Becca and I talked a little bit about trauma last week, but not as much as I had loved. And there's a reason for that. I wanted Becca to be able to share her story in her way and not be feeling like she had to fit something into her story that wasn't necessarily there in her experience. And she talked about that, how when she was experiencing being a foster parent in Honduras, she didn't realize that there was trauma happening. And that's super common. When we are in the middle of the fire, we oftentimes don't realize that there's hard stuff happening that's affecting how our bodies respond, but also how the kids are responding, their whole self. And so that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about trauma and about how we cannot just assume that because a child is being raised in a two-parent healthy household, college educated, all the things, boxes are checked, that they're not experiencing trauma. It comes in so many different ways and shapes and forms that can affect the whole child, the brain, the body, the behaviors, the beliefs, and the biology. There it was. That was the fifth one. That is the reality. And if we are ignoring that, not intentionally, but because we just aren't aware of it, or we think that's not my story, then we might be missing something. So let's go through this. There's 6 things that we want to look at when we are talking about trauma. And the first is a difficult pregnancy. And a difficult pregnancy can be anything that's so extreme, that is, mama's in a domestic violence situation, or she's abusing drugs, or she's maybe coming off of drugs, trying to get clean. That can make it difficult, but it could also be a difficult pregnancy, could be medical complications, or mama is stressed about her job and she has to work 60 hours a week. And although the pregnancy itself isn't necessarily deemed as difficult, her circumstances are, and that can make for a difficult pregnancy because Becca touched on this a little bit at the beginning of our episode. We know that if mama's cortisol levels, which is the stress hormone that runs through our bodies, that is supposed to help us, but if we are chronically stressed for whatever reason, or we are not living a healthy lifestyle, that cortisol just like our babies just bathe in that cortisol in our tummies. And so we need to be aware of difficult pregnancy, that it's not just an unhealthy living situation. Okay, the second one is difficult birth. And again, this can be, they're all on a spectrum. It could be anything from the difficult birth being mama is under the influence and gives birth while she is maybe passed out or not in her right mind. Difficult birth could be cord wrapped around baby's neck when baby comes out. It could be a C-section. And please hear me, there is nothing wrong with C-sections. Those have to happen for a reason, to keep baby safe, to keep mama safe. And there's nothing wrong with it. It is just as much a birth as a natural vaginal birth. Sorry about that. But we also know, though, that a C-section is considered a difficult birth because of the high stress that it puts baby and mama under. Okay. All right. So then the third thing that we want to look at is early hospitalization. Was baby hospitalized for whatever reason? Was baby born early and had to be in the NICU, even if it was for a few days? Was there complications? Did baby fall and break her arm when she was 3 months old and had to be in the hospital overnight? Did baby get COVID or RSV or all the viruses that are out there now that can cause a child to get really sick and have to be in the hospital. When a baby is in the hospital, they're not getting the same care that they would get when they're in their safe home, in their safe haven. They sometimes babies have to be in an incubator and they can't be held, and they can't have the skin to skin, and they can't have the, the rocking and the loving and the delighting in. And so that plays a role in how their whole bodies develop. Okay. Then we are going to talk about abuse. And abuse is what it sounds like. It's physical, it's sexual, it can be emotional. There's all sorts of forms of abuse that sadly kids can experience. And we have to be aware of that. Okay. This is a touchy subject because there are parents who have done the hard work and healing and got their kids returned to their care. And it can be shameful to look back and see the things that they did when they didn't know any better, when they weren't healthy. Maybe they were actively in addiction and it wasn't their true self responding to their child. And maybe they did abuse their child. And so it can feel shameful, but let's not let it. Let's just say that it's a part of the child's story. It can affect the whole child, how they are responding to situations, and we don't want to ignore it. Okay. All right. Then we have neglect. And in my opinion, neglect can also be on a spectrum. And I'm going to use myself as an example just to make the playing field level. Okay. So there's neglect that causes a child to be involved with CPS or placed into foster care. That neglect is pretty extreme. But I also think that there can be a touch of neglect when it comes to certain situations. So here's my example. When I was a single mom, my daughter was 4. I was putting myself through college. And so I got my bachelor's degree and then went on to get my graduate degree. And if you have ever gone through college, but then also add on top of that, if you have ever put yourself through college as a single mom, the homework and the assignments and the papers and the books you have to read and all the practicum hours, all the things, it's not relieved because you're a single mom. It's the same. And so there were nights where I think I would stay up, I would get her to bed and I would stay up really late trying to get an assignment done, get maybe 3-4 hours of sleep. And the next day I was exhausted and I used the TV to get me through that day. And to be honest, it was probably more than just that day. It was probably, if that quarter was really hard, it could have been 3 months of me using the TV or not meeting my child's emotional needs in the way that I could have. And so there can be unintentional neglect that happens when we are talking about life circumstances that lead to that. And we just have to be aware of that. And I think that has actually helped me be aware of my relationship with Haley, although she's an adult now and we are still working on healing some of that. It has helped me to see that I affected how she relates to me or to other individuals because of times that were prolonged that I wasn't there to meet her emotional needs the way that I should have. Okay. And then the last one that we're going to talk about is trauma, which I know we're talking about trauma, but this is more like a house fire. Have you experienced a house fire, a car accident, seeing a dog hit by a car, seeing a person hit by a car, a death? There's so many things that can cause trauma for us. An accident that leads to some severe medical stuff, or even just breaking your arm, which I know is funny to say just breaking your arm, but that is a trauma. And, all of my kids have experienced those types of traumas, those one-time breaking the arm or getting some teeth knocked out. And it affects how they are long term. It affects how things feel on their body. Sorry about my cat. She wanted to join. So we have to be aware of those traumas as well. Okay, that was a lot, and I went through it pretty quick. So if you didn't take notes, that's okay. You can listen to it again and take notes. But the bottom line is this: we have to be aware of the trauma that our kids have experienced and how it affects their whole body. Maybe their sensory needs, maybe it affects how quickly they respond out of fear. So something might trigger them and they could go into that fight, flight, freeze. Maybe it affects what they believe about themselves, their beliefs about whether they're worth more than just that they're worth it, right? That self-worth piece. So let's be aware of that. The other thing that I want to talk about that's related to trauma is connection and the importance of a healthy connection with our kids that is related to the 6 things we just talked about. Because if those come into play, sometimes if you look at each one of those, sometimes it's a matter of there's not that healthy connection there, or maybe there's a break in the connection. And so we want to make sure that we are paying attention to that. What is the importance of connection and attachment? It's really simple. 2 things: that your child feels delighted in and that their needs are met. And when we look at the first year of life, it's basically a cycle where the baby will cry because they have a wet diaper, they're hungry, they're tired, they're scared, they're lonely. They're cold, they're hot. So many reasons why a baby would cry, but as an attentive caregiver that's attuned to our child's needs, we're going to see the baby for what they need, scoop them up, get them changed, whatever, meet the need. And then we're going to hold them and snuggle them and delight in them. So there's those 2 things, right? Or we're going to feed them. And as we're feeding them, we're going to delight in them. Oh, my precious baby, look at you eating your bottle, right? So we're meeting the need, delighting in them. And this cycle is over and over and over. And I have heard that happens 100,000 times in the first year of life in a healthy attachment and a secure attachment. So if we look at those 6 trauma or those 6 things we just talked about with trauma, those can disrupt that cycle. And those can affect how many times that cycle happens, or maybe it doesn't happen at all, right? And that plays into some of this too. And so we have to be paying attention to trauma. We have to be paying attention to the connection and the attachment that this child had with their primary caregiver in the first year of life. So here's some ways that we can help. It doesn't matter if your child is 2 or 7 or 16 or even 22. It's never too late to help your child start to find healing from the trauma that they have experienced that may have affected their whole self. Okay. So these are the 2 things. I'm going to give you 2 things to try and do this week with your kids. The first one is 10 minutes of one-on-one time that is child-led. So you are going to ask your child to choose an activity for you to do together, just you and them, you and her, you and him. And you're going to say, once they've decided what you're going to do, you're going to hold their hands and you're going to say, I'm so excited to play with you right now. I cannot wait to play with you. So you're starting this with a delighting in. Okay. Then we're going to go into the playtime, and it can be a minimum 10 minutes. If it's more, great. But the child is going to pick what you play. And so you're not going to interject, oh, no, we can't do that. Or roofs can't be brown. They have to, or no, roofs can't be purple. They have to be brown if you're building a little house. We're not going to interject our stuff into this playtime. We're going to let them lead the play. But what we are going to do is delight in our kids. I love how you're sharing your Legos with me. Well, that is creative. I have never thought of putting wheels on a horse. or whatever it is. Okay. So we want to be praising their character during this time. So what are the two things that we're giving them? We're delighting in them during this 10 minutes of one-on-one child-led play, but that we're also meeting the need of letting them have some control over what we are doing. Like they have the control for a minimum of 10 minutes. So it's meeting that need of, I want to share the power in this relationship, and actually sharing the power is okay. But this 10 minutes is giving them the control. Now, are we going to let them be disrespectful? Are we going to let them just be wild and crazy? Absolutely not. We may have to step in and say, oh, no, thank you. That's a hurt. Please don't kick mama. Right. And that's okay. But what I'm talking about with child-led play is what the play actually is. You're letting the child lead that. Okay. All right. The second thing you're going to do this week is you're going to try and say yes more. Am I saying yes all the time? No, I'm saying yes more. We want to allow our kids to feel seen and heard. And if we're constantly saying no to them, they don't feel seen and heard. And so this can be as simple as just reframing how we say no. We can say yes while still saying no. It's almost a challenge to you that when you have to say no to something, find a way to say yes instead of no. So here's an example. Dinner is going to be ready in 10 minutes and your child says, "Can I have a snack?" Yeah, you can have a snack. Pick something that's high protein. Pick something healthy. Yes, you can. Because honestly, what's the big deal? Why would we say no about them having a healthy snack before dinner? So they might not eat their dinner, but they just had something healthy. So it's okay, right? So some of this is also us being okay with being more flexible and doing things differently, doing things that is outside of how the norm is. It's okay. Another example would be, "Hey, mom, can I go stay the night at this friend's house that you've never met and you don't know their parents?" So instead of saying no right away, it would be, in our house, we have the rule that we only allow sleepovers when I know the parents, I've met the parents, and we've met the kids, and I've been able to see their home. And so we state the rule for what the family rule is, and then we say, so how about once that happens, we can talk about having a sleepover. How's that sound? But for now, maybe your friend can come sleep over here. Not once did I say the word no, right? And that's what we want to avoid, is saying the word no. So that's what we're going to do this week, is try and say yes more. There will be times we have to say no. No, you may not run into the street. No, you may not jump off the roof of the house. Okay. There are times where we have to say no, but we can say yes more. Okay, you guys, that is what I have for you this week. Thank you so much for being here with me as we chatted about some really hard stuff. If you have questions about anything I talked about, please feel free to email me or shoot me a DM on Instagram. You can also go to my website and fill out the contact form and just say that you wanted to ask me some more questions. I would be happy to talk with you more. I covered a lot of information in a very short period of time. So it's just scratching the surface, but it's important. So also, if you are able to do one-on-one time with your kiddo this week, I would love to see a picture of it. You can either email it to me, or you could post it on my Instagram, send it to me. I also would love to hear your stories about how you're able to meet the challenge of saying yes more instead of no. I would love to hear that. Okay, everyone, have a great week. Next week, I will be talking with my friend, Danielle. I'm so excited that you guys are meeting all my friends. Danielle has an amazing story. She's a foster mom, a single mom, a business owner, and seriously, just the lady boss of the year, in my opinion. She's amazing. Okay, so stay tuned for next week, because that's who I will be chatting with. Have a great rest of your week. See you later.